shouldn't be awake right now. That was the first thought in my head when I opened my eyes. It was 4:38 a.m. No alarm, no noise, no pain. Just awake. Wide awake. I lay there for a few seconds, waiting for my body to correct itself, waiting for sleep to pull me back under like it used to. It didn't, and I already knew it wouldn't. This wasn't new. This had been happening more and more often. Not because I was stressed, not because I was sick, not because something was wrong, according to my doctor. In fact, my doctor says I'm doing fine. My blood work looks good. My heart is steady. My numbers are excellent for my age. That phrase, "for your age," sticks with you after a while, because it explains everything and nothing at the same time. I sat up, slow and quiet, the way you do when you already know the night is over. There's a moment like that. People don't talk about it. When you realize you're not choosing to get up. You're being pushed out of sleep by your own body. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Took a sip, put it down. Stared at it longer than I needed to. My mind felt alert. Too alert. My body felt disconnected, like it was running on a different clock. That's when the thought hit me, sharp and uncomfortable. This isn't just a bad night. This feels permanent. People talk about aging like it's a slow fade, something gentle, predictable, a few wrinkles, a little stiffness. That's not what this feels like. This feels like the rules changed overnight, and no one bothered to explain the new ones. After 70, the body doesn't age slowly anymore. It quietly rewrites the rules. And here's the part no one prepares you for. Doctors don't really explain this stage. They treat symptoms. They adjust medications. They tell you what to avoid, but they rarely sit down and say, here's what will happen to almost everyone after 70. Here's why you're waking up too early. Here's why things feel off even when nothing looks wrong. So you're left alone with your thoughts. Am I declining? Am I losing control? Is this how it starts? That question gets louder in the early morning when the house is still and your mind won't slow down. What I didn't know then, what most people my age don't know, is that this moment is part of a much bigger pattern. There are 5 major changes that happen to nearly everyone after 70. These aren't possibilities. They aren't, maybe if you didn't take care of yourself. They're certainties. And one of them, in particular, will decide whether the next decade of your life is spent living independently or slowly giving that independence away. Studies show that almost everyone over 70 experiences these changes, no matter how healthy they were, how disciplined they lived, or how carefully they followed the rules. But here's the good news, and this matters. Once you understand these changes, you stop fighting your own body. You start working with it, and that's the difference between aging in confusion and aging with control. I didn't know the 5 changes yet. I just knew something fundamental had shifted. And standing there in my kitchen, holding that glass of water, I realized one thing very clearly. If my body is going to change the rules, I need to know what they are. Because not knowing is what really keeps you awake. And that's why today matters. Today, I'm going to reveal all 5 changes, and exactly how to handle each one. Not theories, not vague advice. Clear explanations and practical adjustments you can actually make. If this is relevant to your life, or to someone you care about, please hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps us keep making these videos. Now, let's start with change number 5. Before we go any further, let me slow this down for a moment. Because once you hear the words 5 changes, it's easy to tense up, to assume this is about decline, or loss, or something you should be afraid of. It's not. What you're experiencing right now isn't random, and it isn't a personal failure. We live in a culture that talks constantly about living longer life expectancy, better medicine, more years added to the calendar. But almost no one talks about what those extra years actually feel like inside the body. No one explains how the rules change. So when sleep breaks, when energy feels unpredictable, when your body doesn't respond the way it used to, people assume something is wrong with them. They think, I must be doing something wrong. I should try harder. This isn't supposed to happen yet. But this isn't about effort. After 70, the body enters a different phase. Not a worse one, a different one. Certain biological systems stop adjusting gradually and start shifting in predictable ways. Not for some people, for almost everyone. That's what no one ever lays out clearly. Doctors are trained to treat symptoms. They adjust medications. They monitor numbers. They reassure you that you're fine for your age. What they rarely do is step back and explain the pattern. They don't say there are 5 major changes that nearly everyone experiences at this stage of life. They don't explain how those changes interact, and they don't explain which ones matter most for staying independent. So people are left guessing, and uncertainty is what creates fear, not the changes themselves. Here's what matters most. These 5 changes are not possibilities. They are certainties. Research shows that about 99% of people over 70 experience them, regardless of how healthy they were, how disciplined they lived, or how carefully they followed the rules. That might sound heavy, but it's also incredibly freeing. Because once you understand what's actually happening, you stop fighting your own body. You stop interpreting every new sensation as a warning sign. You stop blaming yourself for changes that were always going to happen. This isn't about fear. It's about understanding what's already happening. There are 5 things people your age need to know about their bodies. 5 things most doctors never fully explain. Not because they're hidden, but because no one connects them into a clear story. That's what we're doing here. And we'll take them one at a time. Starting with the one that quietly shows up first for almost everyone, even if they don't recognize it yet. This is the one almost everyone notices first, not because it's dramatic, not because it hurts, but because it quietly breaks the rhythm of your days. It usually starts the same way. You wake up too early, not an hour before your alarm, long before it. 4 something, 5 something, the house still asleep, the world not ready for you yet. You don't feel rested, but you're not sleepy either. You lie there hoping your body will do what it used to do. Drift, settle, let you slip back under. It doesn't. So you wait, and the waiting becomes exhausting. That's the part people don't talk about, the mental fatigue of lying awake, knowing sleep isn't coming back, but not being ready to start the day either. By mid-morning, you're tired. By afternoon, you're drained. By evening, you're irritable. And slowly, almost without noticing, your world starts to shrink. You skip walks because you're tired. You cancel plans because you don't have the energy. You snap at people you care about, then feel bad about it later. Not because you're angry, because you're exhausted. This is why sleep changes come first. Not because they're the most dangerous, but because they set off everything else. Here's what's actually happening. After 70, the structure of sleep itself changes. Your brain produces far less deep sleep, the stage that repairs your body, stabilizes your immune system, and restores your energy. For many people, it drops by more than half. At the same time, melatonin, the hormone that signals your body it's time to sleep, declines steadily every year after 70. So even when you're tired, your brain doesn't get the message the way it used to. Then there's the circadian shift. Your internal clock moves earlier by 2 to 3 hours. That's why you start feeling sleepy in the early evening and wide awake long before sunrise. This isn't insomnia in the traditional sense. It's not anxiety, and it's not something you caused. It's your internal timing system resetting itself. The problem isn't waking up early. The problem is trying to force your body back into a schedule it no longer recognizes. That's the most common mistake people make. They try to sleep like they did at 50. They stay up later than their body wants. They fight the early evening sleepiness. They lie in bed staring at the ceiling, frustrated and tense. And that tension teaches the brain one thing: the bed is a place to be awake. That's how poor sleep turns into chronic sleep problems. So what actually helps? First, acceptance. This doesn't mean giving up. It means stopping the fight. If your body wants to sleep at 7 or 8 in the evening, let it. That's not weakness, that's alignment. Second, light. Your brain now relies heavily on light cues. Bright light in the morning, especially sunlight, helps anchor your internal clock. Dim light in the evening helps what little melatonin you still produce do its job. Screens at night work directly against you. They tell the brain it's still daytime, even when your body is begging for rest. Third, stop chasing 8 uninterrupted hours. For many people over 70, that's no longer realistic. A split sleep pattern often works better. 4 hours of sleep, a quiet hour awake, then another 3 or 4 hours. This isn't broken sleep. It's a different architecture. And once you stop labeling it as failure, it becomes manageable. Here's the most important thing to understand. Sleep after 70 is no longer about duration. It's about alignment. When your sleep aligns with your new internal rhythm, everything else becomes easier. Energy stabilizes, mood improves, movement feels less like a burden. When it doesn't, fatigue quietly starts running your life. That's why this change comes first. Because when sleep collapses, it doesn't stay contained in the night. It spills into everything. And if this sounds familiar, if you've been waking up earlier than you want, feeling tired without understanding why, then what you're experiencing isn't decline. It's a shift, one that can be worked with. And once you do, you'll start to see how deeply connected this first change is to the next one. The one that decides how much energy you actually have to work with during the day. When sleep falls out of alignment, the first place you feel it is energy. And that's where the next change quietly steps in. Most people notice it in the morning. Breakfast looks the same as it always has. Coffee, toast, eggs, maybe fruit. Nothing unusual. But the way it lands feels different. Instead of feeling fueled, you feel heavy. Instead of feeling ready, you feel slowed down. So you take it easy. You skip the walk you planned. You decide to wait a bit before doing anything physical. By lunchtime, you're still not hungry. Or you are. But eating feels like more work than it should. So you snack. Or you skip it entirely. By afternoon, the fatigue sets in. Not the kind you can nap off. The dull, dragging kind that makes everything feel harder than it needs to be. This is why digestive changes matter so much. They don't announce themselves loudly. They just quietly drain your energy. And most people never realize what's happening. They assume they're eating the wrong foods. They cut things out. They switch diets. They blame coffee, or carbs, or age in general. But the issue usually isn't what you're eating. It's how your body processes it now. After 70, digestion slows down in very real, physical ways. Saliva production drops significantly. That matters more than most people realize, because digestion starts in the mouth. Less saliva means food isn't broken down as effectively before it even reaches the stomach. Then there's stomach acid. After 70, acid production decreases. That can sound like a good thing if you've dealt with heartburn, but stomach acid plays a crucial role in breaking down protein and absorbing key nutrients like vitamin B12, iron, and calcium. When acid drops, absorption drops. Food sits longer, digestion takes more effort. Energy extraction becomes less efficient. And then there's the small intestine. The surface area responsible for absorbing nutrients gradually shrinks. So even when you eat enough, your body may not be getting what it used to from the same meals. None of this is dramatic. None of it shows up on basic blood work right away. But together, it explains why meals that once fueled you now seem to weigh you down. Here's the most common misunderstanding. People think their digestion is failing. It's not. It's adapting to a different pace. After 70, digestion becomes a skill. It's no longer automatic. That means the old eating habits don't always work anymore. Large meals demand too much at once. Eating quickly overwhelms a system that now needs more time. Irregular eating confuses hunger signals that are already less reliable. So what helps? First, smaller meals. Not because you need less nutrition, but because your system handles steady input better than large loads. Eating every 3 to 4 hours keeps energy more stable and reduces that heavy, sluggish feeling. Second, chewing. It sounds almost too simple. But chewing thoroughly compensates for reduced saliva and gives your digestive system a head start. Rushing meals is one of the fastest ways to feel drained afterward. Third, support. Digestive enzymes can help break food down more efficiently. Probiotic foods help maintain the balance of gut bacteria that supports digestion and absorption. This isn't about supplements as a cure-all. It's about support for a system that's doing more work with fewer resources. Fourth, fiber, but the right kind. After 70, insoluble fiber can sometimes make things worse. Soluble fiber, found in foods like oatmeal, bananas, and sweet potatoes, tends to be gentler and more effective. And it has to be increased slowly. The goal isn't volume, it's consistency. When digestion slows, energy follows. And when energy drops, everything else becomes harder. Movement feels like a chore. Motivation fades. Days start revolving around managing fatigue instead of living. That's why this change comes right after sleep. Because even when you fix your sleep alignment, poor digestion can quietly undo the progress. And most people never connect the two. They just know they feel tired. But once you recognize what's happening and adjust how you eat instead of blaming yourself, energy becomes steadier again. Not like it was at 40, but reliable. And reliability is what keeps life moving forward. Because the next change doesn't start with fatigue. It starts with what happens when the body doesn't have enough usable energy to support movement the way it used to. When energy becomes less reliable, movement is the first thing to change. Not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. It shows up in moments that feel almost too ordinary to notice. Climbing the stairs takes a little longer. Standing up from the sofa requires a small pause. Carrying groceries feels heavier than it should. Nothing hurts. That's what makes it easy to ignore. There's no sharp pain, no clear injury. Just a quiet sense that your body doesn't respond with the same confidence it used to. You don't think, I'm losing strength. You think, I must be tired today. So you compensate. You grab the handrail, you push off the arm of the chair, you take smaller steps. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you start organizing your life around avoiding effort. This is why muscle loss is so dangerous. Not because it announces itself loudly, but because it disguises itself as inconvenience. After 70, muscle doesn't fade gradually. It enters a phase of accelerated decline called sarcopenia. Every year, the body loses muscle mass and strength at a rate that used to take decades earlier in life. And the most alarming part isn't how much muscle you lose, it's how hard it becomes to rebuild it. This is where anabolic resistance comes in. Your muscles no longer respond to protein and exercise the way they once did. The same meals, the same activity, the same habits. They simply don't produce the same result. So people assume effort doesn't matter anymore. That's the mistake. The truth is more precise and more hopeful. After 70, muscle maintenance requires intention. Strength is no longer something you keep by accident. It's something you protect on purpose. And here's why that matters so much. Muscle isn't just about lifting or appearance. It's what allows you to stand up without thinking, to catch yourself when you trip, to climb stairs without fear. Muscle is what separates independence from dependence. This is why even short periods of inactivity are so dangerous. 10 days of bed rest after 70 can cause the same muscle loss as years of normal aging. A brief illness, a short hospital stay, a few weeks of taking it easy, and suddenly the body you trusted feels unfamiliar. Recovery isn't automatic anymore. Once muscle is lost at this stage, rebuilding it takes far more effort, and sometimes isn't fully possible. That's why prevention matters more than correction. So what actually works? First, protein. Not casually, not occasionally, consistently. After 70, the body requires more protein than it did earlier in life just to maintain muscle. And timing matters. Protein needs to be spread across the day, not saved for one large meal. Second, leucine. This specific amino acid acts as a trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Without enough of it, muscle doesn't get the signal to rebuild. Foods like eggs, dairy, and lean meats become strategic, not optional. Third, vitamin D. Low levels directly weaken muscle function and increase fall risk. Many people over 70 are deficient without realizing it. Correcting that alone can make movement feel more stable. Fourth, resistance. Not heavy lifting, not extreme workouts. Consistent, moderate resistance training tells the body one essential thing: this muscle is still needed. That signal matters more than intensity. And finally, never let muscle go hungry. Long gaps without protein accelerate breakdown. Overnight fasting becomes especially costly. A protein-rich breakfast and a small protein intake before bed can significantly slow muscle loss. This isn't about turning back the clock. It's about slowing the slide. Because once muscle strength declines, everything else becomes harder. Balance becomes less reliable. Fatigue becomes more limiting. Confidence in movement disappears, and people start confusing weakness with aging itself. It's not the same thing. Aging is inevitable. Severe weakness is not. This is why muscle decline sits at the center of everything. Sleep affects energy. Digestion affects fuel. But muscle determines what you can still do with both. Strength after 70 is independence insurance. It's what allows you to keep choosing how you live, instead of having choices made for you. And once you understand how fragile and how valuable muscle becomes at this stage, one question naturally follows. If strength is slipping this quietly, what happens to balance? The system that depends on strength to keep you upright. That's where the next change comes in. If muscle strength is what gives you power, balance is what keeps that power useful. And this is where things start to feel genuinely dangerous. Because balance isn't something most people think about until it fails. Falls don't usually happen during risky moments. They happen during ordinary ones. In a parking lot, stepping off a curb you've stepped off 1,000 times before. On a front porch, missing a step by half an inch. In the kitchen, turning too quickly to reach for something behind you. There's no rushing, no distraction, no obvious mistake. And that's what makes it so unsettling. People assume they were careless, they blame themselves. But in most cases, it isn't clumsiness. It's a system breaking down. Balance after 70 doesn't decline because you stopped paying attention. It declines because the systems that keep you upright stop communicating as clearly as they used to. There are 3 of them. First, the inner ear. This system tells your brain where your head is in space. It detects motion, tilt, and direction. After 70, a significant number of those sensory cells stop working properly. The signals become delayed, incomplete, or inaccurate. Second, vision. Balance depends heavily on what you see, but contrast sensitivity drops with age. Depth perception weakens. Edges become harder to judge, especially in low light or uneven environments. That's why stairs and curbs become more dangerous, not because they changed, but because your visual feedback did. Third, the brain. Even when information from the inner ear and eyes is still being sent, the brain processes it more slowly. The delay is often just a fraction of a second, but that's enough. By the time your brain realizes you're off balance, it's already too late to correct smoothly. And then there's the psychological layer. Fear of falling changes how you move. You stiffen. You hesitate. You stop trusting your body. Ironically, that tension increases fall risk. Movement becomes less fluid, reactions slower, and corrections more awkward. So fear creates exactly what it's trying to prevent. This is why balance decline is such a turning point. Once someone falls, confidence drops. After confidence drops, movement decreases. After movement decreases, strength fades, and the cycle accelerates. This is why balance comes after muscle in this sequence. Strength gives you the ability to recover. Balance determines whether you need to recover at all. So what actually helps? First, balance training. Not as a one-time thing, as a daily practice. Standing on one foot, shifting weight slowly, turning your head while staying upright. These exercises retrain the nervous system to respond faster and more accurately. Second, dual task training. In real life, you're never just balancing. You're thinking, talking, reacting. Practicing balance while counting backward, naming objects, or following simple instructions helps reconnect movement with attention, the way it actually works outside a gym. Third, Tai Chi. It may look gentle, but it's one of the most effective balance tools available for people over 70. Slow, controlled movements improve coordination, weight shifting, and body awareness, all without strain, and it does something else just as important. It rebuilds confidence. Fourth, environment and footwear. Balance doesn't exist in isolation. Throw rugs, poor lighting, cluttered pathways, and slippery shoes all amplify a system that's already less reliable. Supportive shoes with good grip, clear walking paths, proper lighting. These aren't overcautious measures, they're structural support. Because here's the truth most people learn too late. Balance after 70 cannot be trusted. It has to be trained. The old assumption, my body will catch me, no longer holds consistently, and pretending it does only increases risk. But when balance is trained, supported, and respected, stability improves. Not perfectly, not forever, but enough. Enough to walk confidently, enough to move without fear, enough to keep falls from becoming the event that changes everything. And that's what makes this change so important. Because once balance goes, the consequences are immediate. Which brings us to the final shift. The one most people never see coming, because the warning system itself stops working. This is the change most people never see coming. Not because it's rare, but because the warning system itself stops working. It often shows up in summer. A warm morning, clear sky, nothing extreme. You step outside to do a little yard work, trim a hedge, pull a few weeds, water the plants. The kind of thing you've done your whole life. You don't feel thirsty. You don't feel overheated. You feel fine. So you keep going. That's the danger. After 70, the body's ability to regulate temperature quietly breaks down. Not all at once. Not in a way that hurts. In a way that feels deceptively normal. You don't sweat the way you used to. You don't feel heat building the same way. You don't get the internal signals that once told you, stop. Drink water, go inside. The system that used to protect you stops sending clear messages. This isn't about tolerance. It's about perception. Inside the brain, the area responsible for temperature regulation becomes less sensitive. It doesn't read changes accurately anymore. At the same time, sweat glands become less effective, so your body can't cool itself efficiently, even when it needs to. Blood vessels respond more slowly. Heat lingers longer. Cooling takes more effort. And the most dangerous part? Thirst fades. After 70, many people no longer feel thirsty even when they're already dehydrated. The signal simply doesn't arrive. The same thing happens with cold. The body doesn't shiver as reliably. The warning signs come late, or not at all. So people stay outside too long. They dress for comfort, not safety. They trust how they feel. And comfort is no longer a reliable signal. This is why heat stroke and hypothermia spike sharply after 70. Not because people are careless, but because their bodies stop warning them in time. Someone collapses on a mild day, and everyone is shocked. They shouldn't be. The risk isn't extreme weather. The risk is misreading normal conditions. So what actually helps? First, control your environment. After 70, the range your body can safely tolerate narrows. Keeping indoor temperatures within a stable window matters more than personal preference. What feels a little warm or a bit chilly may already be pushing your system. Second, drink by schedule, not by thirst. Waiting to feel thirsty is no longer reliable. Water has to be intentional, regular, planned, especially in warm weather during activity or after waking up. Third, trust numbers, not sensations. Thermometers, indoor temperature readings, weather forecasts. These become more important than how your body feels in the moment, because your perception is no longer the best judge of safety. This isn't about becoming fragile. It's about becoming precise. When the body's automatic systems weaken, conscious systems have to take over. And here's why this change matters so much. Sleep affects how rested you feel. Digestion affects how much energy you have. Muscle and balance affect how you move. But temperature regulation affects survival. When it fails, consequences don't unfold slowly. They arrive all at once. That's why this change comes last. Because it's the one most people underestimate, and the one with the least margin for error. Comfort is no longer a safety signal. Awareness is. And once you understand that, you stop trusting how things feel and start protecting yourself based on how things actually are. That understanding doesn't make life smaller. It makes it safer. Seen one at a time, these changes don't always look alarming. That's the trap. Because aging after 70 doesn't usually collapse in a single moment. It unravels in sequence, quietly, predictably, step by step. It almost always starts at night. Sleep breaks. You wake up too early, too often, too tired to feel rested, but too alert to fall back asleep. So the day begins already slightly off balance. Then fatigue takes over. Not exhaustion, just enough tiredness to change decisions. You move less. You sit more. You postpone things that require effort. Nothing dramatic, just small adjustments. But less movement has consequences. When you move less, muscle begins to slip away. Not because you stopped caring, but because muscle now disappears faster than it rebuilds. Strength fades in the background. And once strength fades, balance becomes fragile. You hesitate where you used to move confidently. You rely on furniture, you slow down on stairs, you don't trust your body the way you used to. Then one ordinary moment turns into a fall. Not during something risky, during something familiar. A curb, a step, a quick turn. And after the fall, everything accelerates. Time on the ground becomes time in a bed. Time in a bed becomes rapid muscle loss. Rapid muscle loss turns a temporary problem into a lasting one. Recovery takes longer, confidence drops faster, independence shrinks. This is the domino effect of aging after 70. Not one big failure, but a chain reaction. Sleep affects energy. Energy affects movement. Movement protects muscle. Muscle stabilizes balance. Balance prevents falls. Break one link, and the rest start to strain. Break several, and the system collapses quickly. This is why these changes can't be looked at in isolation. Fixing sleep helps energy, but not if digestion is draining fuel. Building strength helps balance, but not if fear stops movement. Staying active helps everything, but not if the body can't regulate temperature safely. Each system leans on the next, and once you see that, something important becomes clear. The real danger isn't any single change. It's not poor sleep. It's not weaker muscles. It's not balance issues. The real danger is not recognizing how connected they are. Because when people don't understand this chain, they react too late. They address the fall instead of the fatigue, the weakness instead of the sleep, the symptom instead of the system. But when you understand the dominoes, you can intervene earlier. You can stabilize one link before the next one falls. And that's what keeps people watching. Because deep down, they recognize this pattern. They've seen it happen to friends, to family. Maybe they're starting to feel it themselves. Understanding the chain doesn't make aging easy, but it makes it navigable. And navigation is the difference between drifting and staying in control. Once you see the pattern, it's hard to unsee it. Because none of these 5 changes are rare, and none of them are optional. No one gets to skip them. Everyone who lives long enough will face disrupted sleep, slower digestion, weaker muscles, less reliable balance, and a body that no longer warns itself the way it used to. That part is unavoidable, but losing independence is not. That's the distinction most people never hear clearly. Aging doesn't take control away all at once. Confusion does. When people don't understand what's happening, they react instead of adjust. They wait until something breaks, until there's a fall, until there's a hospital stay, until choices start disappearing. But when you understand the changes early, something shifts. You stop fighting your body for not behaving like it used to. You stop chasing old standards that no longer apply, and you stop blaming yourself for changes that were never personal. Instead, you adapt. You align sleep instead of forcing it. You eat to support digestion instead of overwhelming it. You protect muscle before it's gone. You train balance instead of trusting it blindly. And you manage temperature with intention instead of comfort. None of that makes you younger, but it keeps you capable. And capability is what independence is built on. The people who stay independent the longest aren't the ones who deny aging. They're the ones who learn how it works. They don't resist reality. They work with it. They understand that after 70, the rules are different, and pretending otherwise is what causes the most damage. Understanding doesn't make life smaller. It makes it clearer. Clearer decisions, clearer priorities, clearer boundaries between what you can't control and what you still can. That clarity is power, and it's available to anyone willing to look at aging honestly, without fear, without denial, and without waiting too long. Because aging doesn't ask for permission, but independence doesn't disappear by accident either. It fades when people stop paying attention, and it stays when they don't. Aging rewrites the rules. Independence belongs to those who learn them. If this resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. A parent, a partner, a friend who's quietly going through the same changes. I'd also like to know, which part surprised you the most? Not what scared you. What made you pause and think, that explains a lot. Leave a comment and tell me. And if you want to continue understanding your body, not fighting it, not fearing it, subscribe to the channel. These conversations are about staying informed, staying capable, and staying in control for as long as possible. Because the more you understand what's happening, the better choices you can still make.